I hope it works. I'm going to go over a brief introduction of myself, how we developed the organics diversion strategy by looking at your current system, best practices throughout BC, engaging with your community and stakeholders, considerations for strategy development, and then finally adopting the regional organics diversion strategy. So I'm Carrie McIver. I've got 30 years now of experience in solid waste management. I was the former manager of solid waste for the Regional District of Nanaimo. I worked for the Regional District for almost 25 years. I was the recycling coordinator. I was the manager of waste reduction. I was the manager of environmental planning. And then for 17 years, I was the manager of solid waste. I retired from the RDN 5 years ago. And since then, I have worked on solid waste management plan updates, and most specifically organic waste diversion strategies for the Alberni-Cloudwood Regional District, the Columbia-Shuswap Regional District, your Regional District of North Okanagan, and the Regional District of Central Kootenay, which is where I am today and why I couldn't be there in person. I am doing a municipal organics collection workshop for the representatives and councillors from Nelson, Castlegar, and Creston. So as you can see here with these pictures, to just get a sense of the breadth of my experience, I worked for the RDN when we introduced one of the first curbside blue box programs in 1991. We then developed that in 2010 into our green bin program. And on the right, you can see putting in a curbside food waste collection program entailed building a new transfer station, having a processing facility, and then also I'm on the bottom there, I'm showing you I have quite a bit of experience with landfills and landfills running out of capacity. So what do we mean by organics? And when we talk about organics diversion, we mean food waste. We mean the backyard compostable waste that probably 60% of your residents are already composting in their backyard, fruits and vegetables, but also the backyard non-compostable, the meats, the bones, the breads, the non-liquid dairy, fat, food, all the things that you're not to put in your backyard composter because you don't want to attract wildlife. We're also talking about green waste, small yard waste, leaves, branches, and grass clippings. And why are we trying to divert organics? First and foremost, reducing organic waste in the landfill reduces greenhouse gas emissions. When food and yard waste decomposes in a landfill, and that's in anaerobic conditions, there's no oxygen, it converts to methane. And methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. It's 20 times more powerful than carbon dioxide equivalent. So getting your food waste out of the landfill is one of the cheapest things residents can do to try to mitigate climate change. It's a lot cheaper than insulating your house or buying an electric vehicle. Getting organics out of the landfill also preserves landfill capacity. You are nearing the end of your landfill life, so getting the organics out is a good thing. It reduces landfill leachate because as that organic waste decomposes, it produces leachate. And if you're producing compost, you're improving soil. Social side, you're protecting human health because you're not producing the methane, you're not producing the leachate. It mitigates against climate change, reduces landfill safety risks from the landfill gas. And economically, if it extends landfill life, that avoids a very controversial siting exercise. It produces a marketable product, provides unemployment, and reduces your cost to manage leachate and landfill gas. So that is why the province of BC has added organics diversion to their goals for solid waste management. They have a goal, and you're probably well aware, for extended producer responsibility programs. They want to see 75% recovery of materials covered by those programs. So that's Recycle BC and the other programs. Organics, they'd like to see 75% of BC's population covered by organic waste disposal restrictions. And finally, they'd like to lower the provincial municipal solid waste disposal rate to 350 kilograms per capita. And regional districts in BC, such as yours, have really got on the bandwagon. That goal of 75% of residents living in regional districts with disposal restrictions has been met. You can see on the left the Capital Regional District, the Cowichan Valley Regional District, Fraser Valley, Kitimat, Stikine, Metro Vancouver, Nanaimo, and Squamish-Lillooet. You will be on that list as soon as you enact your ban, have put in disposal restrictions. that, you can look at the 2016 disposal rates. The average disposal rate in green was about 470 in BC. That's one of the best, the second lowest in Canada. And the regional districts that are collecting and diverting food waste have the lowest rates. You can see the RDN, Cowichan Valley, Capital, Metro Vancouver. So it's really key to reducing your disposal rate. So to come up with an organic waste diversion strategy, our methodology was to first look at your current system, to look at your processing capacity. Is there an organic composting facility in your regional district? What feedstocks would you have? What could you collect from curbside? What could you collect from businesses? And what are the collection and transfer opportunities? We then looked at best management practices in other regional districts, and we prepared options that would work in the Sunshine Coast Regional District. We engaged with local governments, with representatives from the industrial, commercial, institutional, ICI sector, haulers, processors, and residents. And then we developed a draft strategy with options for residential, for ICI, with a detailed work plan, and that strategy was approved by the board January 2018, I believe. So to just briefly go over the current system review at the time, the 2011 Solid Waste Management Plan had targets for organic diversion, had initiatives to look at incentive-based tipping fees to make the tipping fee for yard waste less than for garbage, to promote grass cycling and backyard composting, and then to look at curbside collection of food scraps, yard waste composting, and establishing processing capacity for those food scraps and yard waste. And so the incentive-based tipping fees, your municipal solid waste rate, this would have been 2017, was $150 a ton, and yard waste was free for small loads and $45 a ton for larger loads. We had to look at your current curbside collection services, and so this was looking at the municipal areas. You can see here we had the households and what households had curbside, whether they had garbage, recycling, or organics, and that's looking at how much can we collect. We then looked at the current, at the time, curbside service providers. We know that these names have all changed because Waste Management bought out everybody, but in 2017 you had Direct and Graco. We looked at the tons of green waste diverted, and that was important because if you're going to process the food waste, you need equal quantities of yard waste for food waste. And so you have that feedstock. You're doing very well collecting yard waste. And this just shows that what this slide shows is that while a lot of yard waste in 2012 was actually going to the landfill, by 2016, the majority of yard waste was actually going to Salish soils. So we looked at that. Salish soils, very important. You're very lucky. You have a private sector composting facility that is established in your regional district, had a design capacity of 12,000 tons per year, was taking food waste or could take food waste and green waste, was currently running at about 6,500 tons per year, and I think that's still the case. And then we looked at the issue of the landfill capacity of your Seashelf landfill. The estimated lifespan, 10 to 12 years, may reach capacity in 2027. I was invited to do a workshop with the board and municipal councils to share with them the experience at the Regional District of Nanaimo to try to find another landfill. That was wicked, controversial, and we were unsuccessful, which is also why we have one of the lowest disposal rates, because it was incredibly important to conserve landfill capacity. So looking at best practices review, once again, we look at the disposal rates. We look at the AVICC area, and you can see here that you're doing pretty good in 2015, but if you wanted to do better, you needed to look at organics, which is CVRD, RDN, and CRD. So one of the first things you can do is try to reduce the amount of food waste that is generated and goes to the curb. And we looked at things like compost coaching. That was a pilot in North Van that had some good results to get people to backyard compost. Looked at love food, hate waste. A lot of the data is showing that we waste a lot of the food that we buy, and so encouraging people not to waste. We looked at disposal bans at the Regional District of Nanaimo, how it worked in Metro Vancouver, how it worked in Capital Regional District. We looked at various collection programs and how much they cost and how much food waste they were collecting. We looked at your residential waste composition to say you really still had about 35% of the waste going to landfill was food scraps and kitchen waste. And so we came up with some scenarios. And what we said is that if you started collecting food waste in the municipalities in Sechelt, Gibsons, and the Sechelt Indian Government District, at assuming about 117 kilograms per household, and this is actual numbers that we're seeing over, at that time, 8 years in the Cowichan Valley Regional District and the Regional District of Nanaimo, under scenario one. So the three scenarios, the first scenario was basically that only the municipalities would collect. The second scenario would be you would start collecting in the electoral, in some of the electoral areas, and the third was sort of everywhere, which is, I believe, where you're at now. You would be collecting more food waste, diverting more food waste, and adding lives to the landfill. Because you don't have many years left, each scenario didn't necessarily add years. It added months because you're very close to the end of your landfill life. We also discussed these scenarios with the community and stakeholders. As I said earlier, we met with the processors on disposal bans, long-term contracts, facility upgrades. We met with the haulers, who at the time were very supportive, and we met with local governments. There were some surveys done where residents were very supportive of curbside, as you can see, put scraps in the garbage. Curbside collection, very supportive. So this influenced the previous board to basically approve the strategy. Finally, the considerations. In terms of coming up with a strategy, you had a landfill that was reaching capacity. You want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Disposal bans are very effective and low cost, and they can be sector specific. In terms of processing concerns, while you have Salish soils there, you really got to be aware of odor management, and that most private contractors need a long-term contract so that they have got the ability to borrow the money to maintain their equipment, because composting facilities are a lot rougher on infrastructures than a lot of other, like liquid waste, etc. And then looking at your geography and demographics, you're a long linear corridor. You've got island residents, you've got tourists, and really need to be careful of bare human conflict. And then the issue of community support and member municipality participation. So the final strategy, this presentation was presenting a draft, but the final strategy that was approved by the board was, number one, was to implement a commercial food waste ban. And that would be done in just a minute, I have to reduce something here so I can see that, 2018. Secondly, implement a commercial food waste drop-off at the Pender Harbor Transfer Station, cost estimate as well as schedule. Third, implement residential food waste drop-off in Pender Harbor, Mid-Coast, and South Coast, timing or cost to be determined. 4, implement curbside collection of food waste for all Sunshine Coast residences in electoral areas B, D, E, F, receiving curbside collection of garbage for a March 1st, 2019 start. And that RFP went out and has been awarded, and I understand you are deliberating on that. Implement a residential food waste ban. Implement a food waste reduction campaign. Implement an at-home compost coaching program, and investigate a backyard composting program. There was a detailed work plan for all of those actions with budget and timing, and that is your strategy, and that's how it was developed. Any questions? Hello? Are we still there?
All right. Is this the end of your presentation? And then we're now going to questions? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. My first question would be, what are some of the incentives you've encountered to do your own, to incentivize people to do their own backyard composting? And connected with that, how many regional districts you've worked with have had the option to opt out of the curbside pickup?
Okay, to answer the first question, I'm going to refer back to our experience in the Regional District of Nanaimo. So starting in 1991, the curbside program, all households in the regional districts had curbside collection, and it was 1 can of garbage a week and then Blue Box every other week. And when people would phone me and say, how can I possibly handle a can a week? I would say, are you using your Blue Box and are you backyard composting? And when surveys were done, we were seeing at least 60% of residents were backyard composting. When I discussed this with in the board workshop last year, what we found in Nanaimo is that a lot of people were backyard composting. Why we branded our curbside collection of food waste beyond composting was because it was about keep backyard composting if you are, but we're collecting materials that you don't put in your backyard compost. And we did a pilot program, and we specifically picked a rural area because the rural area directors had said in the previous 10 years that we had been discussing this program, we'll never want to compost because we backyard. And when we did the pilot, we were getting 2.5 kilograms per household a week from the urban areas and 2 kilograms per household a week from the rural areas, even though they were already composting. Indeed, the pilot was excellent because when we started it, the rural route said, you're crazy. We're already composting. We'll have nothing for this. 3-4 months in, they were, oh no, this is really good. We're still backyard composting, but it's beans to bones in the bin. It is chicken carcasses and leftovers, etc. So I think the point I'm trying to make here, and this is a good question, this question's coming up in the presentation I'm giving to the RDCK board and councils this afternoon, it is beyond composting. This is not replacing backyard composting, but this gets a lot more. If you figure that if we had about 60% of residents in the RDN were already composting, and we were still getting 117 kilograms of food waste per household a year, it was beyond composting. So that's the thing is that it's not replacing backyard composting, but you're going to get higher diversion if you provide a convenient curbside collection program for people that are not composting in their backyard, and then for the materials that people don't compost in their backyard. The opting out question, we did not allow anyone to opt out. We had that through the years in terms of, I don't want this, I'm seasonal, etc. But if you allow an opting out, the administrative cost is higher. And everyone else that's in is helping to pay to let people opt out. And if you let people opt out, what guarantee do you have that they are actually reducing their waste? That was a really good point in 1991 where our director said, you know what, we're running out of landfill space. We're going to make everyone opt in. They're going to pay for garbage. We don't want them to dump illegally. And we want to make sure that they're reducing their waste because they're using their Blue Box in 91, and in 2010, they're using their Blue Box and they're using your green bin. So I really don't have, to my knowledge, I don't know any other regional districts or municipalities that are allowing an opt-out. It's administratively very expensive. That's my answer.
Do we have any more questions? Len.
Backyard composting doesn't produce methane. That seems to have been assumed in your presentation. Is that true?
That is true. Backyard composting is aerobic. You're mixing it to get air in it. So when it's aerobic, it doesn't produce methane. It will produce a little bit of carbon dioxide, but no methane. Methane is produced in anaerobic conditions, which is what you have in a landfill.
Director Lee.
Is private garbage residential pickup not considered curbside anywhere? In Pender Harbor, we have garbage pickup, but it's run entirely by a private person, including subscription. Does any other areas have that?
Yes, there are areas where there is curbside collection. provided by the municipality, and outside in the electoral area, there are subscription services. I'm working on a project for the Alberni-Cloudfoot Regional District where that is the case outside the city of Port Alberni. And what the regional district there is considering is banning residential and commercial organics from disposal, which means those private subscription services, those haulers will have to provide collection of food waste. That is the case in the Capital Regional District, where many people in the Saanich Peninsula do not have municipal collection, and they do subscribe to private haulers, but those haulers must provide the curbside collection of organics.
Director Beamish.
Yes, good morning. Bill Beamish, Director for Gibson's. We do allow opting out for our curbside organics collection, and we have approximately, we have over 2,000 units that are collected on a weekly basis, and then we have about 75 people who have opted out by demonstrating to our, in this case, our Chief Financial Officer, that they have the capacity to deal with all the organics, including bones, on their site, and so that they have been allowed to opt out of the program. And they have to apply each year to renew that opt-out approval. But it seems to be working well. It is an issue for people. Some people who have had highly refined disposal methods on their site, composting methods, just did not want to be participants in the green waste, and that we had to have a vehicle for them to allow them to opt out. And so that's the rate we're at, about 75 out of just over 2,000 units being picked up.
I think that that can work in a smaller municipality. I know that my experience was running 25,000 households in the regional district, and we would have had to add staff to the function, and it would just be too expensive. So I think that on a smaller scale, and sometimes you can, that's a decision for you. It's really about administrative costs to do that. And while we had people that said, I'm not going to do it, in the end, nobody wanted to opt out. They basically, because they were also getting garbage and recycling, and we sort of said, if you want to use it, but the truck is coming by, and we really encourage you to use it. So that's something for each municipality to consider.
Director Lee.
It's a little bit off subject, but you mentioned that Nanaimo was unsuccessful in getting a new landfill. I just thought I'd take this opportunity to ask you why you considered they were unsuccessful.
You got a couple of hours. I and my current business partner, but actually worked for Maura Walker, was working with the regional district then. We went through what we thought was one of the best siting processes, all sorts of public consultation, potential sites throughout the regional district. Nobody wants a landfill in their backyard. And while we went through a process where we allowed our advisory committee and members of the public to come up with additional siting criteria beyond what the Ministry of Environment would even require, and we held meetings everywhere, when the decision came to say, here's the best place to go, and 200 people from that area came to the board saying, no, you're going to poison our water, you're going to make our kids sick, our directors, and I think if I was a director I would have done the same thing, said, nope, we're not going to do it. It is very difficult to site a new landfill. And we went through that process twice. And so it is really, really hard. And my professional opinion is it isn't going to happen anywhere on the lower mainland, Sunshine Coast, Vancouver Island. Maybe up north there's been some success with people siting landfills way out in the boonies. But what we found is, for example, we tried to be 20 kilometers away from the Inland Highland Highway, but people would say, you're on an aquifer, you're near houses. So it's incredibly controversial and difficult. And so that's why I'm saying it was unsuccessful. They tried very hard, but it went on for years, and in the end, just stay at the landfill.
CAO Levies?
Thank you, Chair McMahon. So, Carrie, there has been some questions raised around just the legislative process, if you will, around siting a landfill. So you shared your experience in Nanaimo, but can you also at a high level articulate the steps that regional districts would need to go through in terms of siting a landfill and how long that might take working with the Ministry of Environment?
Okay, so the new landfill criteria establishes guidelines, and so you have got buffer distances from residences and airports, etc., groundwater, surface water. But the other important thing is you are doing this through a public consultation process. I believe, and I'm turning over to the oh no, my business partner has her earphones in. For siting a landfill now, you'd have to do it as part of your solid waste management plan update. Yeah, so that you would need to go through a solid waste management plan update, find a site, and have that site as part of your amended solid waste management plan for the ministry then to approve that and then give you an operational certificate. So it is a very, very lengthy process. And the ministry has to feel that you've had very meaningful public consultation and that the majority, well over a majority of people, are supportive of the site. It is very lengthy. I think it would take you at a minimum 2 to 5 years. You've got to come up with potential sites. We came up with sort of 8 candidate sites, and then we reduced them down to 3 really good potential sites. The money you need to spend on doing all of the geotechnical, all of the work to know what your soil is like, which way is the groundwater going, very expensive.
Director Beamish.
Just a follow-up question, and I don't want to get off track of the purpose here, but looking at options for establishing actually the traditional dump site, are there other options now, technology coming into play that we should be looking at as opposed to looking at another place just to fill with garbage?
That is always an option that a board looks at the Regional District of Nanaimo. We looked several times at what we like to call new and emerging technologies, but I can tell you that in terms of waste to energy technologies, you do not generate enough waste. We didn't really have enough waste even on the island to make an incinerator cost effective. Some of the newer technologies are more successful, like anaerobic digestion of mixed waste, but they need 100 times more waste than what you generate on the Sunshine Coast. So that's the rub. If you were Metro Vancouver or Los Angeles, you might be able to look at some of these new technologies, but even then, you still need a landfill for residuals from the technology or from facilities, or if your facility is down for repairs, you'll always need a landfill. And we dealt with this. So at the Regional District of Nanaimo, before we decided to stay at the current landfill, in 1999, the board made a decision that we would export to Cache Creek. And we had difficulty even siting a transfer station. We changed our mind on that because the cost of diesel went up, and it just made more sense to do a better job at our current landfill. And I will say that if you look at the landfill in Nanaimo compared to your landfill, they are on a different order of business. We decided that where we were, which was right on the edge of town, we had to operate the best landfill we could because we couldn't site another landfill. And so garbage became very expensive. But that is also what drove our diversion and why we hit 350 kilograms per capita. So that many regional districts keep looking for this magic bullet, but to my professional opinion, the bullet isn't there yet.
Director Theis?
Could you go into in what ways the landfill in Nanaimo is superior to the one in Sechelt, and whether that might be an option that might be available to us?
Well, yes, I can, and I'll tell you why it was more like your landfill up in Sechelt is away from everybody. Our landfill in Nanaimo was visible from Cedar Road, which was a busy thoroughfare. So we really needed to make sure that we were a really good neighbor. And we worked on saying, okay, there's a landfill there, but we don't want people to really know it's a landfill. So we spent money on bird control. We spent money on landfill gas collection to ensure that there weren't any odor issues. We made sure that we closed any slopes that were visible from the road. And in fact, we had the neighbors agreeing to a nature park on the closed old dump so that we could actually turn it into a community amenity. And that was sort of the price we were paying to say, we're going to run this. We're going to optimize the capacity. We also used newer technology in landfill design to do what was called piggyback expansions, or it was a geogrid retaining wall. So it was new engineering to get us more capacity. Fully lined landfill, the drop-off area is all paved. The idea was that people didn't think they were going to the old dump, that they were going to a modern facility where they could drop off their materials and they were never allowed up on the working face, but more money was spent. And I'm not saying that the Sechelt landfill is bad. It meets the standards, but if you're trying to be a good neighbor, there are some improvements you can make, and it costs money.
Director Lee.
I kind of got two questions. Well, maybe one observation. What you just described for the Nanaimo landfill was that it looks better, but that doesn't necessarily mean it prolongs its life. It just means it was acceptable. And at the end of the day, they're still burying around 200, and they're going to need some place to put it in a, well, let's even say it's 10 years. So have they a solution after the 10 years, or is it just delay and hope like hell a miracle happens?
No, it actually, no, so when we decided to stay, and I think that decision was made in 2003, we then embarked on a construction project to expand the existing capacity. And that was with several of, I think it was almost, well, I won't say the price, but building this geogrid retaining wall all around the landfill to provide more capacity. But at the same time, because we knew how expensive it was to build new capacity, we pushed our diversion to the max. So earlier, as I said, the Regional District of Nanaimo banned food waste from commercial establishments in 2006. We introduced the green bin in 2010, 2011. We have bans on any product stewardship material, as you do as well, but really pushing diversion. And one of the things that really sold diversion with the population was, if no one's willing to have a landfill, everybody has to do their bit to minimize the amount of garbage that goes to landfill. There's probably another 20 years there. And the new solid waste management plan that was developed after I left is actually aiming to get down to, I believe, around 100 kilograms per capita per year disposal to extend the life even longer. Because the alternative at the end of that would be likely export to another landfill. But what happens is when you start running out of capacity, you start getting a lot smarter on how you're filling, on what's going in the landfill, on how you're constructing additional cells. And so I think at your landfill, I'm not sure, but I'm sure that your engineers can look and say, what can we do here to maximize space? But if you're spending extra money to maximize space, you do not fill it with food waste or recyclables. You do everything you can to get that out of there.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. Have you heard of a company called Emergent Waste Solutions, who has a project up in Vegreville, Alberta, where they take all waste and convert it to its base components?
Yes, I have.
Okay. What can you tell us about them?
I can't go into detail about that, but I do know that all through my career, there have been companies that come and say, we can do this for you. We can do this at a lower cost than landfilling. Typically, they haven't worked that well. To go from a pilot scale to a full scale is problematic. This one would be in Alberta. Now, Alberta's disposal rate is about over 1,000 kilograms per capita, and BC is at 470. So it also has to do with these technologies, similar to what I said earlier. They need a lot of waste as a feedstock. I recommend that you don't ignore new and emerging technologies. I believe at the AVICC Solid Waste Committee, you are keeping a watching brief on new technologies. So I'm not saying dismiss them, but look very carefully at, are they operating at a scale that is similar to yours, and what are the actual costs after they've been operating for 5 to 10 years?
Okay, I'm going to put in a question here. One of the problems that we have on the coast, and I believe across BC, is illegal dumping. It's one of, I think it's been exacerbated by increasingly tight regulations. Is there anything we can do about that?
Absolutely. So this is something that came up yesterday. I was meeting with the RDCK board. So here's the experience in the RDN, and it's similar to other regional districts. When we introduced tipping fees in 1991, that was a real concern of our board, that there would be illegal dumping. So what we did is we started mapping all the dump sites. We started cleaning up the dump sites. We started working with user groups to educate them on where garbage could go. We then realized about 15 years later that, it wasn't about educating people that were using the back roads. It was about catching people that were illegally dumping. So we actually had staff. We had a 0.5 of an FTE to be responding to all illegal dumping complaints. We kept track of everything we cleaned up. And we were able to show our board every year that if you took all the waste that went to landfill and all the waste that was recycled, and you added that up, that's the total waste generated, and all the waste that we picked up from illegal dump sites, less than 1% of the solid waste generated in the regional district was dumped illegally. And so what we said with that is that it's not a significant problem. It is a serious problem because it should not be dumped. And so we were able to say dollars will go to illegal dumping education and enforcement at the same time as restrictions went in to promote good waste management practices. And I'll tell you, the Ministry of Environment Conservation Officer Service would say, while we can't tell you this, publicly, most of the dumping is done by people that are not really part of society. They don't really care. And as much education as you do is not going to stop them. Except for, and I'll stop, yard waste. People think they can dump yard waste because it's just going to decompose. To finish on illegal dumping, major issue every regional district, so that if you're going to be dealing with higher tipping fees, you really do have to have an illegal dumping prevention and enforcement program.
Director Hiltz.
Hello. Thanks for the presentation so far. I've got a series of questions. So I'll just kind of go off. I'm going to start with the role and timing of bans of a landfill. That's the one. Mm-hmm. Then I'm going to go to the importance of the bins in organic pickup, standard size of bins, personally supplied, this type of thing. Then there's the aspect of invasive species, knotweed, lamium, these type of, which are particularly in rural areas, and the relationship between illegal dumping and invasive species is pretty high in our area. I'm going to keep going here.
I'm taking notes.
Okay. Then there's what happens with the result of the composting and the product that comes out of that? Who sells it? Who gets it? In our community, we did a little bit of a pilot of a neighborhood composter, and what we found is people want to get rid of it, but not many people want it in return. Whereas if you're a gardener, you kind of want it back. That's why you don't want to get rid of it in the first place. So it was a different kind of. So what else we got here? And a little bit with the banning is the relationship between institutional and commercial and residential. So there's a bit of a list there for you.
Okay, well, I'll start with first with bans. So I think that as ban design and implementation has evolved, what Metro Vancouver and the Capital Regional District did is they gave a 2-year notice that they were going to ban organics. When the RDN, when we did our ban, and I was working there then in 2006, we had about a 6-month notice that we were going to ban commercial organics, but we had been talking about it in our solid waste management plan for years. So the thing is to give enough lead time for businesses to get their programs in place. You need to decide, and you've said that you're going to do commercial first because it is easier. Businesses are a bit more nimble with their haulers to start collecting it, and that you're going to do residential after you've got curbside in place. So Metro Vancouver and the Capital Regional District did both residential and ICI. At the RDN, we did ICI. We never did ban residential. We didn't really need to because we were getting such good diversion at the curb. So I think there's a lot of experience, and with bans, you basically need to consult with the haulers, consult with the business community, make it work for them. What we found in 2006 is that while it cost a business a bit more, they all wanted to do it because it was the right thing to do. You can design it so that you are putting surcharges on the haulers, but you phase that in. And really what you want is to get to a point where separating out the food waste is business as usual, and that you as the local government do not really have to run it at all. Sorry, that's a text for me. In terms of bins, that is an interesting subject. That's what I'm talking about this afternoon. If you go, the RDN program went manual collection of just a small 40-liter green bin. We did that because we'd done a study on curbside programs and determined that the cheapest way for us was to only collect food waste, because if we started collecting food and yard, we would be looking at about $50 more per household. So the route was manual. But I'll tell you, the world seems to be going automated, and that's from a worker health and safety point of view. Automated programs, the bins are not small enough. We are quite good with a 40-liter bin in Nanaimo. For most people, you can average 2.1 people per household. The city of Nanaimo has converted to an automated program, and because the smallest bin they can actually use effectively is a 120-liter, they are now collecting yard waste at the curb. Many people wanted it, but it has increased their cost significantly. And the thing to remember, when you start collecting yard waste, you're not increasing your diversion because you weren't collecting it at the curb anyway. It was already being diverted. So I think I've seen some of your media. That's an issue in the Sunshine Coast. It's going to be an issue in the RDN now because the collection program outside of the city of Nanaimo, the regional district has made a decision to go automated. I live in a rural area and I don't want the carts. So it gets personal. It is something to work out what's the most cost-effective solution that works for the most people. I can't speak too much on invasive species. I know that we would take them at the landfill and bury it, and I also know that the composting facility would take it. So I'm afraid I can't give you a lot of answers on that. Marketing compost, absolutely. One of the things that's key to a program is that the processing facility has markets. In Nanaimo, the compost that is produced is used in landscaping applications as a soil amendment. Some regional districts that I'm working with want to get a product that their municipalities will use on all their recreation facilities that they can sell back to the public. So that is key. that if people are separating out their food waste, those that want to use it should be able to buy it. And you want it, while selling the material will never cover the full cost of processing. It will help. So I think I've covered your 4 questions. Not as good on the invasive species.
Yes, thanks very much.
Director Pratt?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation, Carrie. I'm curious a little bit on the process side because obviously education, getting the community on board with everything that you're doing is key, and doing that from the start of the process is what I think why Gibson's was so successful with their curbside organics. And I was just, and maybe this might be a conversation for offline as well, but I'm curious at what point, like for example, in Nanaimo, did you involve the community? Did it end up just being high-level government conversation and staff conversation and then roll out the program, or was there an engagement process beforehand? Because I thought I knew a lot, and then, but I think that methane that is 20% more potent than carbon for greenhouse gas. That one just hit
20
us.
times.
25. See, times,
No,
times,
20
yeah,
20
times. Yeah, that one just, okay, well, there you go. It's even that much more potent. But, you know, that education piece and bringing the community on board is something that is so key in the success of any program. And so I'm, if you have a minute just to say something on that
Sure.
on that piece, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. So what we did in Nanaimo, so first of all, as I said, because we had gone through a landfill siting exercise, we did have a certain level of awareness in the community. The curbside recycling. Pardon? Oh, the curbside recycling program that we had, we would send out quarterly newsletters. We started a year ahead, telling people, actually, I'm going to mute you.
Muted.
We started a year ahead, letting customers know this was coming. But the most important thing we did was we did a pilot program. We did 2,000 households. We got money from FCM to do it. And that was the way that there were 2,000 households, so that there were people that said, God, we want to be on this, because there was a route in Nanaimo, there was a route up in Qualicum Beach, there was a route out in Cedar. And that really let us kind of test drive what problems people would have. This is why we called it Beyond Composting, Beans to Bones in the Bin. And it created a real awareness so that when the pilot was over, the people in the pilot program wanted to stay going. And people were really chomping at the bit to get on the Green Bin program. So it is really important to have some good communications and education. We had, yes, we had a high level. We had all of our partners. This was a partnership of Nanaimo, Parksville, Qualicum, and Lanceville. We met regularly. We had a lot of details to work out. Successful implementation. I'm really proud of the fact that I didn't have any politicians complaining about anything, because we spent a year planning it out and delivering it. Public education is key. Having the pilot was really important, and letting people know a good year ahead that it was coming.
Director Beamish.
Again, for Gibson's again, just a bit of history with Gibson's. Back about 2004, we instituted the backyard burning ban, where we had a bylaw, and people were interested in air quality, quite frankly. So we introduced a backyard burning ban, but we recognized that could actually create the collection and storage of green waste on properties. So we also simultaneously introduced a green waste drop-off site at our public works yard. And we did it there so that it avoided having people driving up and down the coast and creating other GHG emissions to go to the landfill with their green waste that was accepted there at the time. That's become a bit of a habit with people now in Gibson, so that I haven't been to the landfill in years because I have no need to go there now. I just go up to the green waste. I cut my grass, I put it in a bin, I drive to the green waste drop-off, and I drop off the grass clippings. Many others will do the same thing. There's often a line up there to get in. And that allowed us on the organics program to not have to worry about the other green waste because it was already being dealt with the drop-off. And over time, the regional district took over the drop-off site because the Area F and Area E people were using it as well, and so it became just a regional, sub-regional drop-off, and it's still very useful to this day for that purpose. I'm not sure where that green waste goes to, frankly. I think at one point in time it went to Howe Sound where it was burned as hog fuel. I'm not sure where it goes to today, but it doesn't go to the dump. And it allows us then to focus strictly on the organics, and we use the small bins. I have at my house an under-the-sink small green bin, and I transfer the material from there into a larger, I guess, a 40-liter bin that goes out in the curb once a week. Very effective and very popular with the residents, and that has worked very well. We don't pick up the green waste in the community at this time.
I think that's very similar to the original RDN program. I can though share that often we would get people moving from the Lower Mainland or other bigger cities, and they'd say, "Why aren't you collecting yard waste?" This is going to be, as I said, one of the issues with going to automated, whether or not they're going to start collecting yard waste, because most people do drive it to drop off or don't produce it in the first place.
I just have a couple of questions that I wanted to raise. One was, I know that a lot of RDs are shipping garbage to Washington State, and it seems to me that that would create a risk that if Washington State should change its environmental rules, and all of a sudden a whole lot of governments in BC would be in a bunch of trouble. And I was wondering about your comment on that. And my other comment is that you've been very good about warning us about things that will cost money. But even as a rookie director, I've figured out that telling taxpayers that things are going to cost money is not a way to get popular. So have you got any tips for us on ways that we can save money?
So to your first question about export, to my knowledge right now, the only regional district that's exporting to Washington is Quebec, just north of you. Most other regional districts are handling their own waste. And Cowichan, sorry. My partner's decided she is listening. Cowichan and Whistler do send some out. But the majority of regional districts do handle it in-house, so that was just on that. When I'm saying things are expensive, I'm saying it to you as directors. When you're trying to sell a program, you have to appeal to people's sort of better angels, and I think it's very important to appeal to the environmental side, and that's why I'm stressing climate change. When we introduced the Green Bin program in 2010, we made it very much about climate change. I don't know if people were quite as aware in 2010 as they are now in 2019 that something needs to be done. So my argument was always garbage costs because it is expensive to handle it correctly. We need to make sure we are not contaminating the environment, that we are doing the right thing. So I think that approach worked very well in the RDN, and particularly worked when people would say, why are we doing this? This is what it costs. We could argue a brand new landfill cost more than many of the diversion, actually all of the diversion programs that we were implementing, because the next new landfill must be built to a much higher standard. So it was kind of like, I'm not trying to, when I say things are expensive, I'm not saying it to say don't do it. I'm saying just realize garbage costs. It's not a cheap dump. If we're going to throw it in the ground, we need double liners, we need leachate collection, we need landfill gas. You start looking at the cost of disposal, and diversion starts looking a lot better.
That's great. I see that we're coming up on 10:30. Do we have any final questions? Director Theis.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. And I just wanted to see if there's any kind of tips you have with wildlife interference and having animal-proof storage outside of the home, or any strategies that rural areas are employing to make sure that the bear problem is dealt with. And yeah, I'll leave it at that one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let me finish with that. When we introduced the green bin, and it is happening in very rural areas, there was a concern with bears. So we're always on top of education to tell people, first of all, bears were coming to get your garbage anyway. You need to have proper practices in the rural areas where bears are, to not leave your garbage outside, to keep your barbecue clean, to not leave a lot of fruit on your trees, etc. So we really push the education. Many of my clients now dealing with, let's say, Cathette Regional District, where there are more bears than what we were seeing in the RDN, are looking at more bear-proof containers for the food waste and full bear-aware program. So it is an issue, and you need to factor that into your education and really connect with your Bear Smart or Bear Aware program, and look at whether you want to spend the extra dollars to have bins that are wildlife proof.
Okay, there's two more questions in the queue, and then I think we should wrap it up. So, Director Pratt.
Hi, Carrie. Just again, a little bit around process because I'm curious on the industry, bringing industry businesses like restaurant, grocery stores, corporations into the conversation as well, and what kind of, how was the uptick with them and the embracing of the new policies?
Okay, I think that I'm just gonna web. A commercial ban is going to be an easy sell. And I'll tell you that when we did it in 2006, and we were meeting with chambers of commerce, and we were saying that if you were a large generator, you'll probably save money because organics processing fee is cheaper than a tipping fee for garbage. But if you were a medium or small, it might cost you a bit more for the extra containers for separation. We did not get any negative feedback. What we got is, we want to do this. It's the right thing to do. Now, 10 years later, with Capital Regional District and Metro Vancouver and all over Canada, many of the big corporations that are operating in your regional district are already having to do this in other jurisdictions. It is not new now. So the important thing, though, still is deal with your haulers, because they're the people that will be providing the service. Make sure the business community knows, and from my experience in Nanaimo, engage with the Chamber of Commerce. Get on their speaking agenda. Get out and maybe talk to the Rotary clubs, because then you get a really good perspective on things rather than the people that are always complaining. You're getting people that are, coming to a lunch and dinner meeting and can give you a good idea about what they think of it. So I don't think the process for a commercial ban should be that difficult, because it is really becoming, business as usual. It was a little tougher for us in 2006, but even then, the businesses were all on board, and many of them really supported the idea of a ban, and they wanted to be able to say, we're doing the right thing for the environment, because that helped them get more customers.
Okay, Director Beamish?
I guess there's one final question. I mean, we're talking here about changing behaviors and removing materials from the existing dump, which only has a life of 10 more years, 8 more years, 7 more years, and we're going to add another year onto it. The other big thing we obviously need to do is focus on the future of the new dump, because this is just a stopgap measure. It'll allow us to obviously to move into a new dump site with reduced waste and longer life, or maybe a different size of dump. But it's something that we really need to focus on as a board and start now, because we don't have any time. These got to be done in tandem right now.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that was a question.
No, it was really just a comment. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that was an editorial. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Carrie, for an excellent report and your enthusiasm for solid waste. We appreciate it very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Now you've kind of worn me out, and I have to get up again for Regional District of Central Kootenay. So thank you for ending now.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right. Do we want to move into the next part of the agenda or take a short break, which is... Okay. I have a request for a 5-minute break.